It is 6 a.m. in Washington, 1 p.m. in Kiev, and 8 p.m. on Thursday, February 27th here in Korea. Thank you for joining us. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gun-young, and this is ARIRANG News at 8. Now, we learned earlier this Thursday that a South Korean national is being held in North Korea on charges of trying to overthrow the regime. Seoul's unification ministry almost immediately issued a statement calling on Pyongyang to repatriate the Christian missionary. ARIRANG News unification ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee has our top story.
Jeong-uk, a South Korean missionary, entered North Korea on October 7th with Bibles and other religious materials in hand. The next day, he was captured by North Korean authorities and has been held against his will ever since. At a press conference in Pyongyang on Thursday, Kim said he had wanted to build an underground church in the North Korean capital.
I advised North Koreans that I met in China to break the North Korean regime and build God's nation, and ordered them to build an underground church in the north.
North Korea claims Kim is a South Korean spy and was plotting to overthrow the state. This claim was backed up by Kim, who testified that he received money from South Korea's spy agency in exchange for providing information about the North. The National Intelligence Service denied the claims Thursday, and it's worth noting that Pyongyang has a tendency to coerce statements out of its detainees. South Korea's unification ministry says it was notified about the arrest in November, but that the North refused to give details on the detainee.
It was inhumane for North Korea to continue ignoring our repeated calls to identify and repatriate the detained South Korean and to only reveal his identity now.
The ministry demanded that the North ensure Kim's safety until he is repatriated and to allow his family and lawyer to visit him in Pyongyang. It's rare for a South Korean national to be detained in the North, and the incident comes amid thawing inter-Korean relations. Experts expect Kim to be released sooner rather than later, as North Korea is known to showcase its detainees before sending them back home. But considering the unpredictable nature of the communist regime, the possibility of the South Korean missionary being used as a bargaining chip cannot be ruled out. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, North Korea and Japan have agreed to hold working-level Red Cross talks in China early next month. This, according to Japan's foreign ministry. Now, in the 6 days of talks scheduled to start on March 3rd, the Japanese Red Cross and its North Korean counterpart are expected to discuss repatriation of the remains of Japanese nationals abducted by North Korea. The last Red Cross talks between the two countries were held in Beijing back in 2012. An evil, evil place. That's what U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is labeling North Korea for its systematic human rights abuses. This after a UN-mandated report shed light on the dire situation there. Our Oh Jin-ju has this report.
In his strongest condemnation of North Korea yet, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has branded the country an evil place and slammed the regime for its grave human rights abuses and nuclear weapons program. In an interview with American network MSNBC on Wednesday, Kerry said there was no doubt North Korea is one of the most closed and cruel places on earth, and there is evil taking place there that all of us should be deeply concerned about. He emphasized the need for enormous focus by the world in order to hold the regime accountable, and that every aspect of any law that can be applied should be applied. Addressing the serious human rights abuses and corruption in the North, the top U.S. diplomat pointed out that North Korea has conducted numerous executions and forced people to watch them do so. Kerry also said he had very serious discussions on North Korea's nuclear weapons program with Chinese officials during his recent trip to Beijing, and added the two countries will continue to press Pyongyang to take action. Kerry's comments come after a UN-mandated inquiry last week described systematic, widespread, and grave human rights violations taking place in North Korea. The inquiry will present its findings to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva next month and call on the UN to refer the situation in the North to the International Criminal Court. Oh Jin-ju, ARIRANG News.
Now, shifting our focus, Korea's household debt recently passed the monumental figure of 1 quadrillion won, roughly $931 billion US. That's obviously a huge concern for those being buried under massive amounts of debt, but also worrisome for the government as it tries to inject new life into the economy. Well, to tackle the problem, the government announced a series of policy measures on this Thursday, and our Jeong-uk reports.
The government announced on Thursday a set of measures for tackling the country's chronic household debt problem, with Finance Minister Hwang Sung-hee saying the government will be proactive.
To bring the ballooning amount of household debt under control, the government has set a goal of lowering the debt-to-income ratio by 5 percentage points by the end of 2017.
The debt-to-income ratio stood at 164% as of the end of 2012. The government said the debt-to-income ratio was near the mid-160% range at the end of last year. Economists view household debt as a persistent problem for the economy as it could affect domestic demand. To address it, Korea's financial regulator urged local banks to raise the portion of fixed-rate loans.
The Financial Services Commission plans to push local banks to increase the portion of loans with fixed interest rates and encourage households to repay the principal and interest together.
The regulator hopes to raise the portion of both fixed-rate loans and principal interest repayments to 40% by the end of 2017. Financial regulators also said the growth in the amount of debt held by self-employed people or people using secondary financial institutions such as savings banks say it's a bad sign, as people in this group tend to have higher rates of defaulting on their debt. Jeong-uk, ARIRANG News.
Now, candidate nominations for local elections have become the source of heated debate in the country's political realm, with local elections coming up on June 4th. It's been a three-way battle between the ruling party, the main opposition, and now the soon-to-be party led by maverick lawmaker Ahn Cheol-soo. Well, for a closer look into this issue, we're joined live in the studio by Kim Ji-yoon, analyst at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Kim, welcome to the program.
Glad to be here.
Now, the pros and cons of this nomination system have been in the spotlight for some time now ahead of the June elections.
Right.
Now, both the ruling Senator Party and the main opposition Democratic Party pledged during the presidential elections last year or in 2012 that they will scrap the system. However, the ruling party, for one, is backtracking or trying to backtrack from that pledge.
Yes, it's been discussed for a long time, and they finally declared they are going to maintain the nomination system. And in detail, the motion they just passed, they have two components. First, they are adopting the open primary system, and second, they are having the strategic nomination process. So open primary, which is best known the U.S. example, that basically the party registered members and non-party registered members just get together and vote. But under the Senator Party's plan, basically they have the half consists of non-party members and half consists of party members. So it's, strictly speaking, it's not really an open primary, but they keep it that way. And the second part is strategic nomination. They claim that they keep it because, the seat should be saved for the women and the people with disabilities. And if there's anyone who is applying for the candidacy, so party can nominate the person. But the controversial part is if the party determines or judges that the candidate is too weak or not competitive enough, then party committee can decide who is going to be nominated. So it's really controversial, and even internally, there's a lot of uproar from the Senator Party.
Well, definitely a controversial issue in and out of the party. Now, the leader of DP, Kim Han-gil, and lawmaker Ahn Cheol-soo met earlier today, and reportedly we got news that they, in essence, agreed to work together towards scrapping this system. Now, although they said that speculation has been on the rise that the main opposition Democratic Party will keep its candidate nomination system in place. Now, what kind of a conclusion do you expect the DP to make?
Well, Mr. Kim Han-gil actually said they'll try, and oh, he'll think about it, basically. So he didn't really give any final answer because the Democratic Party is doubly squared right now in a very difficult position. As soon as the Missionary Party decides and officially claim that they are going to maintain the system, and DP said, well, we are going to maintain the system too, because if we abandon it, then we're going to be screwed in the election because we have the party label. And in my opinion, I think that many of the members in the DP and the Missionary Party as well, they are really relieved by this decision because the nomination process in local election is largely determined by the National Assemblyman. And if, that's particularly so that after we abolished the Jigudang, which is a local party branch, in 2004. So they play the function of the Jigudang. So, why to leave this power behind from the perspective of National Assembly people? But then there's an unpredictable variable, which is Dr. Ahn Cheol-soo, and Dr. Ahn Cheol-soo and his new party that fiercely criticized the Democratic Party on changing the mind and sustain the party nomination in the local election. I mean, the meeting doesn't seem to be anything but just in vain to me.
All right. Well, meanwhile, Ahn Cheol-soo, like you said, he has announced that his soon-to-be party, the New Political Vision Party, will not be putting up candidates for or naming candidates for mayors, county chiefs, ward chiefs, and local council members ahead of the June local elections. What does this mean, and what is the new party aiming at?
Well, they claim that they're not going to nominate anyone for the lowest level local election, the local council members and the chief. First of all, it is practically impossible for Dr. Ahn Cheol-soo and his new party to recruit all the members and to nominate. Basically, almost 3,000 people for the local council members, and 226 local council chiefs should be elected. I mean, this party is setting up in March, and what kind of time do you have? You have to go through all the vetting process and also make a decision to nominate the right people. So practically, it's impossible. They realize it, so let's forget about it. And also, secondly, if both parties, Henry and DP, they decide to maintain the nomination rule, then the local level election will be very much the battle of mobilization. I mean, the new party of Ahn Cheol-soo is basically relying on the name and the reputation, popularity of the Dr. Ahn Cheol-soo, and they do not really have the local mobilization or party organization at the level, which is critical in this case. So they saw this coming. So I think they kind of decided a quite smart way.
And if I'm correct, the popularity of Dr. Ahn Cheol-soo has been, on a steady decline in recent days or weeks. So that's another thing to look out for. Now, Dr. Kim, how do you expect this latest debate over candidate nomination system to affect the June 4th elections?
Well, Senator Party will probably tone down the whole issue, and maybe they instead will say that, oh, we have open primary. Dr. Ahn Cheol-soo and his new party condemn both parties and label them as old politics and try to distance themselves from DP and then say that we triumphed the reform agenda. I personally do not really think the Senator Party will be influenced by this issue in the election result, because election is all about the mobilization. I mean, you do not persuade the people, non-supporters or the swing voters. It's all about the mobilization of your supporters, particularly so in the elections with the lower turnout, like a local election. So on that note, it may be negatively affect the Democratic Party, because not just because they gave up the reform, but I think because, it looks like a DP is overpowered by Senator Party and another pushover again. So it's such a disappointment for DP supporters.
All right, we'll definitely be on the lookout for the local elections in June. Dr. Kim Ji-yoon, analyst at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies, thank you so much for speaking with us this evening. Now, most of Korea has been cloaked under a thick layer of fine dust over the past week or so, and the blanket of haze has people worried about the possible health effects. And to better monitor and forecast air quality in the country, Korea just may join hands with China. Our Shin Se-min reports.
As a mother, it's been really challenging keeping the house clean with flying dust particles everywhere. My skin also gets irritated when I go outside.
I usually enjoy outdoor activities, but nowadays I try to stay inside unless it's important. It's been a little boring.
They can feel it, breathe it, and taste it, and they're not happy. The heavy drowning smog from China that has blanketed most of Korea over the past week continued Thursday. An air pollution warning imposed by the government was finally lifted in the afternoon after 75 hours, which makes it the longest warning ever. At its highest level, the concentration of fine dust stood at over 170 micrograms per cubic meter. And that's nearly triple the amount recommended by the government as being safe. The polluted skies have forced the elderly and the young to stay inside as their toxic particles can cause respiratory problems and chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases. One local hospital in the southern part of Seoul has reported a 20 to 30% increase in respiratory patients over the past week.
I've been coughing really bad for the past couple of days. I've even started to cough up yellow phlegm, so I now wear these masks and carry some in my bag as replacements.
To better monitor and forecast air pollution in the future, Korea has turned to China for help. Environment Minister Hwang Sung-hee says Korea will jointly develop a new forecast model with Beijing to better prepare citizens for fine dust waves headed for Korea. Once it's up and running, the government will be able to use the data collected to improve the accuracy of its forecast.
The Korea Meteorological Administration says that the high levels of fine dust will gradually decrease as the night progresses. But it is expected to be a recurring problem as the annual yellow dust season is nearing. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Now, the Supreme Court of Korea sentenced a 25-year-old man to life in prison on Thursday for kidnapping and raping an 8-year-old girl in the southern city of Naju. The defendant, identified only by his surname Ko, was earlier convicted of abducting the sleeping girl from her home in 2012 and raping her before trying to choke her to death. The High Court also upheld a lower court's decision that will require Ko to undergo chemical castration over a 5-year period. Now, this is the first time the Supreme Court has ruled in favor of chemical castration on a sex offender. The case sent shockwaves throughout the nation when it first happened and prompted the government to take a stronger footing on sex crimes. And another Supreme Court ruling on this Thursday, and the nation's High Court has upheld a 4-year prison term for Choi Tae-won, the head of SK Group, for embezzling company funds. Now, Choi was convicted of embezzling some $43 million from 2 SK Group subsidiaries to make personal investments in stock futures and options in 2008. Now, his younger brother Choi Tae-won was sentenced to 3 years and 6 months behind bars for collusion. This is the country's, or SK is the country's 3rd largest conglomerate and has more than 90 affiliates. And we have news out of Ukraine. A group of armed men have reportedly seized control of the main government building on Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula. Now, the incident comes less than a day after Moscow ordered surprise military exercises near the Ukraine-Russia border. Our Polly reports.
Eyewitnesses say some 30 fully armed men ran inside Crimea's government headquarters early Thursday, kicking out police officers and then raising a Russian flag prominently on the building's rooftop. After taking over the building in the regional capital Simferopol, another large group of people arrived by bus and entered the site, reportedly carrying heavy weapons. It's still unclear who the group is, as they have yet to make any public demands, only posting a sign reading Crimea is Russia. But witnesses say they spoke Russian and appeared to be military separatists.
Those are 100% soldiers because police officers or anybody else wouldn't just. They are paratroopers, Russian paratroopers, or whatever they call themselves.
Ukrainian security forces have been put on high alert, and the local government has said it is negotiating with the armed men who remain barricaded inside. No one has reportedly been hurt, and all civilians were released from the building. Tensions in Crimea have been sharply rising following the ousting of President Viktor Yanukovych last week and recent orders from Moscow to launch military exercises near the Ukrainian border. It comes as Kiev is in the midst of a shaky transition. The interim leadership announced Wednesday its lineup for a new cabinet, and parliamentary deputies are voting for a new national unity government to lead the country until snap elections in May. The Maiden Council, Kiev's main protest camp, has proposed Arseniy Yatsenyuk, a former economy minister, as prime minister. He said the country was on the brink of disaster and that the government will have to take extremely unpopular steps to revive an economy battered by months of political unrest. Paul Yi, ARIRANG News.
Now, on a different note, numbers show Koreans are increasingly opting to vacation overseas rather than here in Korea, but there's plenty to see and enjoy within the nation's border. And the government is determined to remind them and everyone else of this fact. Connie Kim reports.
Take a sneak peek at Korea's best travel destinations. Ahead of an 11-day travel week designated by the government in May, the Culture Ministry and Korea Tourism Association have launched a travel exhibition to give Koreans a better idea of where to spend their vacations. The exhibition kicked off with Korean fusion music with the Culture Minister, foreign ambassadors, and Seoulites in attendance.
There are a lot of good travel destinations in Korea. We want to inform and promote diverse places so that people can visit different places in the nation.
For me, as the ambassador of Russia, it's of great importance, especially this year, because our two presidents last November, when my president, Mr. Putin, he visited Korea, they reached an agreement on the special regime for visits. So I am waiting for crowds of Russian tourists coming to Korea.
From the city of Andong's famous Korean beef to Ulleungdo Island's pumpkin taffy, the exhibition introduces the unique tastes that different regions of the country offer. Visitors were drawn in by the exhibition's national park booth, where they got to walk on simulated park trails. One feature that highlights the ecology of the demilitarized zone was especially popular, offering visitors a chance to see something they normally can't. While there's plenty to do for adults, there's just as much for children to take in and enjoy.
Archery was the most fun activity, and I learned that Gangwon-do has great scenery and lots to do. I want to visit Gangwon-do.
With plans to encourage Koreans to travel more within the country, the nation's one and only travel exhibition will be welcoming visitors until March 2nd at the COEX Convention Center. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
From Thailand, where the nation's embattled prime minister has been summoned for questioning to a controversial anti-gay bill vetoed in the U.S. state of Arizona. For a look at what's happening across the globe, we go live to our UDN standing by at the News Center. Liana, let's start with Thailand. Now, what exactly is Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra being accused of?
Hello, Kanyang. Yingluck stands accused of negligence over a disastrous rice subsidy scheme. Opponents of the prime minister say she turned a blind eye to warnings that the scheme was fostering corruption and causing huge financial losses. Prime Minister Yingluck says she was only involved in formulating the scheme, not its implementation. The National Anti-Corruption Commission summoned her on Thursday to answer questions, but she sent lawyers to represent her instead. If found guilty, she could face impeachment and a 5-year ban from politics. Now, over in the United States, the nation's spotlight was on Arizona, where Governor Jan Brewer vetoed a controversial bill that would have allowed businesses to refuse service to gay and lesbian customers. Brewer, a Republican, said the law could hurt the state's economy by driving away businesses.
Arizona. I have not heard of one example in Arizona where a business owner's religious liberty has been violated. The bill is broadly worded and could result in unintended and negative consequences.
Phoenix is the host city for next year's Super Bowl, and the bill raised concerns that the event, which is likely to bring in hundreds of millions of dollars to the local economy, could be moved. NASA announced Wednesday it has discovered 715 new planets in our galaxy, 4 of which may be suitable for life. Until now, the existence of only around 1,000 planets in the Milky Way had been confirmed. The planets were found by the so-called Kepler Space Telescope, which was launched in 2009 to discover planets that are in or near habitable zones similar to Earth. Now that's all from me for now, and I'll be bringing you more updates in just about 2 hours.
And let's now go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center for a checkup of the weather. Now, Bo-kyung, we finally have some good news that the final fine dust warning has been lifted in Seoul.
That's right, Kwon-young. The 4-day-long ultra-fine dust watch was finally lifted as of 3 p.m. But we're not out of the woods yet because Seoul is currently seeing 142 micrograms per cubic meter fine dust, which is triple the normal levels. Now, taking a look at the current conditions, we're seeing light clouds in some regions and cold air from the north should move in later tonight. As a result, we can expect normal fine dust levels nationwide tomorrow. Otherwise, showers are on their way early tomorrow morning in the East Coast regions, which may continue through Saturday. As for tomorrow's readings, Seoul, Daegu, and Busan all make it to 12 degrees. Moving on to other regions, Jeju peaks at 11 degrees. Meanwhile, Dokdo and Mount Kumgang make it to 7 and -2 degrees, respectively. Kwon-young.
All right, thank you for that, Bo-kyung. And we have this piece of news just coming in. North Korea has fired 4 short-range missiles over the waters near South Korea's northeast earlier this evening. Now, Seoul's officials at Seoul's defense ministry say that the missile launches were detected at 5:42 p.m. on this Thursday, and that the South Korean defense ministry is closely watching for any additional launches or possible provocations by North Korea. And we will have more updates on that story in our later newscast. And that's all from me at this hour. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back with a complete wrap-up of the day on Primetime News.